The bruises on Ella's arms were hard to ignore. I'd first noticed them a few weeks ago, small, faded marks that I'd dismissed as the result of clumsiness. But with each passing day, they grew darker and more prominent. They were becoming hard to overlook, no matter how hard I tried to convince myself they were nothing more than minor injuries from everyday life. One morning, as Ella made breakfast, I noticed her wince slightly when she reached for the milk. The sight of the bruise on her forearm was just visible beneath her sleeve. I wanted to ask her about it, but she brushed off any concern with a light-hearted comment. "Clumsy me," she'd said with a half-hearted smile. "I guess I'm just a walking disaster." Her attempts to cover up the bruises only fueled my anxiety. Her late-night trips to the gym, which had started as a casual endeavor, now seemed suspicious. Each time she left, there was a palpable tension in the air, an unspoken question hanging between us. I had begun to wonder if there was more to her routine than she was letting on. One evening, unable to shake the growing unease, I decided to follow her. As she prepared to leave, I told her I had a late meeting at work. She didn't question it and left with her gym bag slung over her shoulder. I trailed her from a distance, my heart racing with each turn she took. "Where the hell is she going?" I muttered under my breath as I watched her drive past our usual gym. My fingers drummed impatiently on the steering wheel as I followed her to an unfamiliar part of town. Ella parked in front of a rundown building that was cloaked in shadows. The structure was old, its paint peeling and its windows grimy. It was a stark contrast to the well-lit, modern gym she claimed to frequent. I watched as she slipped inside, her movements hurried and anxious. I waited a few minutes, my nerves on edge. I glanced at the building's exterior, noting the lack of a sign or any indication of what went on inside. My curiosity turned into worry. I could feel my pulse quicken as I approached the entrance, trying to remain inconspicuous. "God, what are you hiding from me?" I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. The entrance was slightly ajar, and I pushed it open just enough to slip through. Inside, the building was dimly lit and filled with a musty smell. I crept through a narrow hallway, my footsteps muffled by the worn-out carpet. The sounds of muffled voices grew louder, along with soft, rhythmic noises that made my skin crawl. I reached a door, slightly open, and peered through. What I saw made my heart stop. Ella was in a room with a man I didn't recognize. They were engaged in an intimate, painful embrace, her face twisted in a mixture of anguish and yearning. A sickening realization washed over me. The bruises, the secrecy, the late-night outings, all of it now made a cruel sense. I backed away from the door, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I felt a cold, hollow emptiness settle in my chest. In the car, I sat in silence, staring at the building's facade as it disappeared into the night. My mind replayed the scene I'd witnessed, the betrayal etched into my memory. I knew I had to confront Ella, but I was overwhelmed by a tumult of emotions, anger, sadness, and a profound sense of loss. When Ella returned home later that night, I tried to act normal, to mask the turmoil roiling inside me. I greeted her with a forced smile as she walked through the door, her face flushed from the night's activities. "Long night at the gym?" I asked, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. Ella looked at me, her eyes weary. "Yeah, it was a tough workout," she said, her tone lacking its usual cheerfulness. She moved to the kitchen to prepare a late-night snack, unaware of the storm brewing within me. I watched her, feeling a chasm opening between us. The conversation that followed was strained, filled with half-hearted questions and forced pleasantries. I was haunted by what I had seen, and the weight of the discovery hung heavy in the air. The night after discovering Ella's secret, my mind was a whirlwind of confusion and anger. I couldn't sleep, my thoughts racing with the image of her entangled with another man. The betrayal was a gaping wound, and I needed answers. I decided to confront Ella and the situation head-on. I waited until she left for another one of her late-night gym sessions. This time, I didn't follow her. Instead, I prepared myself for the inevitable confrontation. My plan was to break into the building again, to see if I could find more evidence or perhaps understand what was happening behind those walls. As I approached the building, my heart pounded with both fear and determination. I used a Slim Jim to pry open the side entrance and slipped inside, just as I had before. The dim hallway seemed even more foreboding in the dead of night. I moved cautiously, each creak of the floorboards magnified in the silence. The muffled sounds from the previous night were even louder now. I followed them to the same room where I had seen Ella. The door was ajar, and I peered through, my heart hammering in my chest. Ella was there, as I had feared. But this time, the encounter was more explicit, more raw. She was with Mark, the man I had seen her with before. Their intimacy was palpable, marked by pained expressions and desperate movements. It was clear that whatever was happening was not just physical but emotionally charged and deeply complicated. I stood there, paralyzed by the scene before me. My mind was a blur, struggling to make sense of the betrayal. I felt a surge of anger and heartbreak. I wanted to burst in, to confront them both, but my legs felt like lead. Just then, Mark looked up, his eyes catching a glimpse of movement near the door. He froze, and Ella turned, her eyes meeting mine. The shock on her face was instantaneous, her mouth forming a silent gasp. "James." Ella's voice was a whisper, barely audible. Her face turned pale, and she scrambled to cover herself, her eyes wide with a mix of guilt and fear. "What the hell is this?" I demanded, my voice shaky but firm. I stepped into the room, unable to mask the hurt and anger in my tone. Mark, still in shock, quickly pulled away from Ella, a look of irritation crossing his face. "James, you don't understand." "Understand what?" I interrupted, cutting him off. "That my wife is cheating on me. That she's been lying to me about where she's been." Ella's eyes were brimming with tears. "James, please, let me explain." "Explain." I laughed bitterly, the sound echoing off the walls. "What is there to explain? I saw everything. I don't need any explanations." Ella moved towards me, her hands outstretched in a plea. "James, please, just listen. It's not what it seems. There's so much more." I shook my head, the pain too raw to bear. "I don't think there's anything you can say that will make this okay. I trusted you, Ella. And now I feel like everything we had was a lie." Mark stood up, moving towards me. "Look, man, I didn't know." "Don't," I snapped, raising a hand to silence him. "Just don't." I turned and walked out, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts and emotions. The confrontation had left me reeling, the betrayal sharper and more painful than I had imagined. The scene in that room was etched into my memory, a constant reminder of the trust that had been shattered. Back at home, I waited for Ella to return. When she did, I confronted her with the harsh truth, our conversation laden with anger and sadness. She pleaded for a chance to explain, but my heart was heavy with the weight of her betrayal. The confrontation had left me feeling more isolated than ever, with a burning desire for answers and an aching emptiness where our love once was. The sting of betrayal drove me to seek revenge. It wasn't just about confronting Ella anymore, it was about reclaiming some semblance of control over a situation that had left me powerless and hurt. After the painful confrontation at the building, I decided I needed more than just a face-to-face clash. I needed to make a statement, to reveal Ella's infidelity in a way that couldn't be ignored. I hired a private investigator named Sam, a grizzled professional with a no-nonsense attitude. Sam was thorough, digging into every aspect of Mark's life. He compiled a dossier that included photographs, background information, and details about Mark's habits. It was more than I'd anticipated, but the details painted a clear picture of the man who had become a part of my life without my knowledge. One night, I received a call from Sam. "Got some updates for you," he said, his voice gruff. "Mark's a regular at a club downtown. Thought you might want to know." The club was a dimly lit, upscale venue with pulsating music and an air of exclusivity. I arrived early, a sense of purpose driving my actions. My plan was simple: to confront Mark in a public setting, to expose the truth in a way that would leave no room for denial. As the night progressed, I saw Mark walk into the club, his presence almost magnetic as he navigated through the crowd. I waited for the right moment, my heart pounding with anticipation. When Mark was near the bar, I approached him, my voice low and controlled. "Mark," I said, my tone laced with icy anger. Mark turned, his face a mix of surprise and irritation. "What the hell are you doing here, James?" "I came to settle a few scores," I said, my voice steady. "You and Ella, this affair you're having. I'm here to make sure everyone knows the truth." Mark's face hardened. "You don't know the full story. Ella and I." "Save it," I interrupted. "I've seen enough to know that what you've done is unforgivable." I pulled out a folder from my bag, filled with the evidence Sam had gathered. I opened it and laid the photographs on the bar, each image a testament to the betrayal that had shattered my life. People around us began to notice, their whispers adding to the tension in the air. "James, please," Mark said, his voice rising above the noise. "This isn't a place for this. We can talk." "No, Mark," I said firmly. "This is exactly where we're going to talk. Everyone here is going to know what kind of man you are." As the crowd gathered, I saw Ella enter the club, her eyes scanning the room nervously. When she saw the scene unfolding, her face went pale. She rushed over, her voice frantic. "James, stop this. Please." "Stop what?" I asked, my voice cold. "Exposing the truth. I think it's about time people know the reality of what's been going on." Ella grabbed my arm, her eyes pleading. "James, I'm sorry. I was wrong. Let's go somewhere private and talk this out." "No," I said, pulling my arm away. "There's nothing left to say. You betrayed me, and now everyone will know." The confrontation caused a stir in the club, and Mark, visibly embarrassed and angered, left abruptly. Ella stayed behind, her eyes filled with tears as she watched him go. I followed her outside, where the cool night air did little to calm the burning anger inside me. "You didn't have to do this in public," Ella said, her voice breaking. "But I understand why you did. She paused, trying to gather her thoughts. "I was wrong, James. I'm sorry." "Sorry?" I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "Sorry doesn't fix this. You've shattered everything we had." Ella's face crumpled with grief. I know I made a terrible mistake. I was lost, and I didn't handle it right. But this isn't what I wanted." As I looked at her, I felt the emptiness of my revenge. It hadn't brought me the satisfaction I'd hoped for. Instead, it deepened the void within me. The anger that had driven me felt hollow now, leaving me with a profound sense of loss and disillusionment. "Maybe," I said quietly, "it's time we both figured out what we really want. Because this," I gestured to the chaos around us, "this isn't going to fix anything." Ella nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand. I just hope, in time, we can find a way to make things right." As I walked away from the club, the weight of my actions settled heavily on my shoulders. Revenge had given me no real solace. The night had revealed the harsh reality of our fractured relationship, leaving me with the bitter truth that healing and understanding would be the only paths forward. The aftermath of the confrontation left everything in disarray. The club incident had made our personal struggles public, and the sting of betrayal was raw and palpable. The next few days were a blur of emotional turmoil and strained silence. Ella and I avoided each other at home, each retreating into our own spaces, trying to process the magnitude of what had happened. On the 5th day after the club scene, Ella approached me hesitantly as I sat in the living room, staring blankly at the wall. Her voice was tentative, her eyes red from sleepless nights and tears. "James, can we talk?" she asked, her tone barely above a whisper. I looked up, meeting her gaze with a mixture of exhaustion and curiosity. "Talk about what?" My voice was weary, betraying the emotional toll the past few days had taken. Ella took a deep breath, stepping closer. About us. About what happened. I know things are a mess right now, but I need to explain. I need you to understand. I nodded, motioning for her to sit down. All right. I'm listening. Ella settled onto the couch across from me, her hands clasped nervously in her lap. I've been thinking a lot, she began, her voice trembling. I realize now that my actions were completely wrong. I was trying to escape from my own issues and ended up making everything worse. Mark was a mistake, one that I deeply regret. I leaned back, my expression guarded. Regret doesn't change what happened, Ella. It doesn't undo the hurt. I know, she said, tears welling up in her eyes. But I want to make amends. I want to try and fix what's broken between us, if you're willing to let me. Do you really think it's that simple? I asked, frustration creeping into my voice. You think saying, I'm sorry, will just make everything go away? No, Ella replied, shaking her head. I know it's not simple. It's going to take time and effort. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I just need to know if you are, too. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. I don't even know where to start. Everything feels so shattered. Ella reached out, her hand trembling as she took mine. We start by being honest. We talk about everything, why this happened, how we can prevent it in the future. We rebuild from the ground up. I looked at her hand, the warmth of her touch a stark contrast to the cold emptiness I felt inside. It's going to be hard. Trust isn't something you can just rebuild overnight. I understand, she said softly. But I'm willing to try. I love you, James, and I don't want to lose what we have. Her words hung in the air, a tentative hope amidst the wreckage of our relationship. I squeezed her hand gently, feeling the sincerity in her touch. I'm not sure if we can ever go back to how things were, but maybe we can find a way forward. Ella's eyes lit up with a flicker of hope. I believe we can. It won't be easy, and there will be moments of doubt. But if we're honest with each other and work together, I think we can rebuild. We spent the next few hours talking, laying bare our fears, regrets, and hopes. It was an emotional conversation, filled with tears and revelations. We discussed our relationship's problems, the mistakes we both made, and the steps we needed to take to address them. Later that evening, as we sat together on the couch, a sense of cautious optimism began to emerge. The conversation had been painful but necessary. We knew there were no quick fixes, no guarantees of success, but we were willing to take the first steps toward healing. I don't expect miracles overnight, I said, my voice steady but soft. But I'm willing to try if you are. Ella nodded, her expression a mix of relief and determination. I am. We both have a lot to work on, but I believe we can get through this together. As we sat together, the quiet of the evening enveloping us, it was clear that our journey was far from over. The road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but for the first time in days, there was a glimmer of hope. The path to reconciliation was uncertain, but we were both willing to take it, step by step, with honesty and commitment guiding us through the healing process.